Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Lauren DeJesus, Civic Engagement Educator at the UIC Latino Cultural Center. So again, thank you for joining us for today's Climates of Inequality public program. This is the first of 3 for this semester. Before we get started with the program, there's a few things we'd like folks to keep in mind. First, I wanted to do a quick access check. Please let us know if our audio is okay. Let us know in the chat. And also let us know if you are able to access the live caption by clicking more and show subtitle at the bottom of your Zoom screen. With that, if you have any questions about accessibility during our program, please message us and we will guide you through that process. Also to note, this program will be recorded on Zoom. So I know that some folks that have been entering the space need to accept the prompt. As always, be mindful of the virtual space. Please use the chat for comments or questions, and we'll try to get to them towards the end of the program. And one thing I will also do right now is share my screen. And what I'm sharing right now is a screen with a purple background with black text featuring a short land acknowledgement. So in the spirit of healing, we acknowledge and honor the original peoples of the Chicagoland area, the Three Fires Confederacy, Potawatomi, Odawa, and Ojibwe nations, as well as other tribal nations that know this area as their ancestral homeland, including the Menominee, Ho-Chunk, Miami, Peoria, and Sauk and Fox. Further, we recognize that Indigenous peoples are the traditional stewards of the land that we now occupy and acknowledge that this land is the current home to one of the largest urban Native American communities in the United States. Native people are part of Chicago's past, present, and future. And finally, to acknowledge is to act. We encourage everyone to consider the multitude of ways to translate knowledge and thoughts into active support for Indigenous peoples and communities locally, nationally, and around the world. So again, thank you for joining us for today's program. I will now pass the virtual mic to our Center Director, Rosa Cabrera.
Thank you, Lauren. Can you hear me? Great. And good evening and welcome everyone. I am Rosa Cabrera, the director of the UIC Rafael Cintrón Ortiz Latino Cultural Center, known as the LCC. And thank you for joining us in this virtual space for another round of Climates of Inequality presentations. We are very excited to present the 4th season of Climates of Inequality in partnership with the Social Justice Initiative this fall. We will continue to highlight local environmental and climate justice leaders who will be sharing frameworks and updating us on solutions to address the disproportionate impacts of climate change and environmental pollution affecting their communities. You will be able to find the previous presentation videos in the LCC website. I believe that the link was put in the chat already. So check those out when you get a chance. We are also super thrilled that the Climates of Inequality Traveling Exhibition is coming to UIC in less than a month. And Essence McDowell, the Director of Communications at the Social Justice Initiative, will tell you all about this in a minute. We are also going to be putting the just created poster invite in the chat so that you have all the information there. So I am now going to pass the mic along to you, Essence, so you can tell us all about this, the exhibition, what is going on, and when it's opening, and all that good stuff.
Thank you, Rosa. So happy to be here sharing virtual space with you all. My name is Essence McDowell. I'm the Director of Arts and Communications at the Social Justice Initiative at UIC. We're a small but engaged unit that connects scholars, activists, and communities around issues of social justice. We do that through public programming, conferences, symposiums, and most recently a think tank that takes place nationally. One of our main areas that we're able to do our work is through the Chicago Justice Gallery. The Chicago Justice Gallery was formerly a pop-up gallery that inhabited various spaces along Halsted Street, and it's we were able to revamp. I'm actually sitting here today, and it's an art space at UIC that supports social justice artists and arts activism through exhibitions and public events. The gallery's focus is to serve as a bridge to connect scholarship, activism, and educational arts with social justice themes. And we're really excited because we've been collaborating with the Latino Cultural Center in partnerships with community organizations and a phenomenal group of exhibition designers and creators to work on climates of inequality, stories of environmental justice. Climates of Inequality is an exhibition that features stories of environmental justice, collective resistance, and community solutions to create a more just future. As Rosa shared a little, this exhibition features 7 stories of communities as they confront histories of environmental racism and how these legacies are contributing to the climate crisis. These stories are actually a part of the participatory public memory project that was led by the Humanities Action Lab, and they created a collaboration with over 500 students, educators, environmental justice advocates in more than 20 cities across the US, Puerto Rico, Colombia, and Mexico. Our exhibition at the gallery features those stories, but also centers climate justice as a social justice issue and expands the Chicago story from Little Village to feature other sacrifice zones, Altgeld Gardens, Calumet River, McKinley Park, Pilsen, and the Southeast Side. By featuring the voices of local artists, leaders, residents, this exhibition affirms the work and the dedication of frontline communities in combating this environmental and climate harms, and also just pushing to create a more just future. And so this exhibition is opening on October 11th, and we hope that you'll be able to join us. There'll be a link in the chat, if it's not already there, that you can use to just RSVP, because we want to know that you're coming. And I hope to see you all on the 11th as we open the exhibition. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Essence. I hope that everybody is excited about this, and tell your professors that, you know, to give you credit for this exhibition because it's going to be phenomenal. Before we start the presentation, a few shout-outs of appreciation are in order to our partner again, Social Justice Initiative, and the 2 community organizations that have been working with us for the last 5 years. On this project is Alianza Americas and Little Village Environmental Justice Organization known as ELVEJO. Also to the Humanities Action Lab, where the Climates of Inequality project resides, for helping us sustain this program throughout the year. We also have a list of co-sponsors, the UIC Sustainability Fee, Latin American and Latino Studies, Department of Anthropology, Freshwater Lab, Great Cities Institute, Las Ganas Project, and Museums and Exhibition Studies. Of course, to the students, panelists in my environmental and climate justice class, who will be facilitating a short conversation with our guest speakers after the presentation. They are Algie Guzman, Maisha Tassing, Tania Sess, and William Garcia. Today's presentation will focus on the southeast side of Chicago and the role the young people played in the environmental climate justice movement, including the campaign to stop General Iron from moving into their neighborhood. We're fortunate to hear about this from ECJ organizer Oscar Sanchez, who's the Southeast Environmental Task Force co-executive director. Oscar has a proven track record in environmental justice, anti-violence advocacy, youth empowerment, and community planning. And all of this with a strong background in project management and advocacy. He has led successful citywide campaigns resulting in powerful change in the city, including denying permits at the city level and securing over $7.2 million in investment for Chicago Public School Restorative Justice Program. Oscar is committed to advancing equitable policies and infrastructure investment that prioritize historically burdened communities, making a significant contribution to the field of environmental and social justice. So now, please join me in welcoming Oscar.
Hola, hola, buenos días. Good day to everybody. It's really an honor to be here with everybody. My name is Oscar Sanchez, as mentioned, son of Francisco Javier Alvarez and Yovigilda Sanchez, and grandchild to Marcelino and Margarita Sanchez, who are children of the Chichimecas Indigenous group in Mexico. And I consider myself a child of the Southeast side. And before I get started, I just want to give love. I see on the folks attending, want to give love to Edith Tovar, Brenda Santoyo Gomez, Louis Cabrales, and as well as Nat Alaya, who's on this panel with us. So, you know, it means a lot to be doing this, but I want to put an emphasis on today's focus that the ongoing issue of general iron in the Southeast side and the way that you've really changed the narrative and changed how we organized. And if folks love what they're hearing or they see anything, they're like, yes, that's what we have to be doing. Show some emojis. It really gives energy to the room. So we'll be talking about, you know, the importance of the background and the history. Something I always paraphrase as James Baldwin. You feel that you're alone until you read, listen, and see all that impacts us. So never feel alone. We are going through this oppression and we're going through this together. And we're going to fight this together. We'll be talking about the role of youth. And something I always loved saying when I was a youth director was, in every aspect of change, there was youth involved. And I want you to think about that again. In every aspect of change, youth were always involved. And alongside that, we'll be talking about general iron, of course, but we'll be talking about what we're facing at that time. It was a legacy of pollution, a legacy of business, and legacy of decisions that repeatedly harmed our communities. To kind of go back into focus of youth, it's really giving love to youth for listening and being with us and talking about their work during the fall of 2020, when there's conversations about creating safe schools. Their understanding was saying that they didn't want police officers in schools. So there was a campaign to remove SROs, or service resource officers, from schools at George Washington High School. And from there, the idea transformed of not only having safe schools, but safe environments and how we're addressing racism. So this is really important conversation that youth led these campaigns. And when youth lead, you allow them to pave the way for the future they want to live in. And I always talk about, you know, investing in youth means investing in our future, and allowing youth to lead means allowing our future to lead now. So those are just things I want folks to really, you know, take in as we're having these conversations. Because, and I mean this respectfully, I'm 26 right now, and I still consider myself someone who's youth or youthful or young. And I want you to know that, you know, as youth, you have visions. You become visionary, you become unbreakable, you become hopeful, you are inspirations. Like, these are things that are just, you know, part of the culture of being young. So I want to kind of set the stage that this goes back over almost 100 years, from like the 1930s racist housing policies, where they degraded Black property, degraded where brown folks lived. And those were kind of the set map of creating industrial corridors. And we talk about, you know, in organizing a one map of Chicago, where it's been almost 100 years, but you see where poverty is. You see where the highest amounts of heat waves are, flooding are, failing infrastructure. And again, just to say, health burdens are health costs. And so a lot of the times, again, we talk about, again, the importance of addressing this. When we don't address this, it happens for another century, right? And one of my favorite things to say is that, you know, just because we're poor doesn't mean we should be treated poorly. And all these things, talking about one map, talks about the cumulative impacts, or how we phrase it, it's weight. It's a burden that we have to pay for. So in the same sense, we go back to this timeline of 1930s, but let's speed it up to 2018. This is when there began to be a monologue with these developers of General Iron. And General Iron, they came to our community, spoke with our stakeholders, with environmental groups. We told them our concerns, and they said, well, regardless of your concerns, this is the plan. And that just talks about the way that there's governance. Regardless of our concerns, regardless of our ideas, regardless of what we envision for our community, it feels as if industry or corporations always have the decision-making power and communities don't. So I want folks to really think about that. But that's 2018, kind of things really sped forward in 2020 with the peak of the pandemic. Our communities are struggling. Our communities was one of the hardest hit communities. And this is something that we jumped on a call and we're scared. And we said, we're going to do what we always do. We're going to take care of each other. So we set up the Southeast Side COVID Response Collective, which was the Southeast Side Mutual Aid. We were community members taking care of the community. We were operating 8 food pantries. We were doing COVID information sessions. I want to give love to one of our community members, Dr. Luis Rivera, who was phenomenal in these times alongside the teachers. Teachers were here with us wanting to provide information to their classes and to parents who had so much concerns. And again, our only safety net or our only way of having this knowledge was us. And that's scary to think. We're facing a pandemic and we're not getting any answers. So we're finding the answers ourselves. And things moved along and we felt comfort. We felt that we were making sure people were fed. We made sure that people had their rent paid. We did all the things to take care of folks, basic needs. And in the summer of 2020, many folks recall as a very much historical part, the murder of George Floyd. And there was these uprisings. And there was this really big context with youth in the Southeast Side saying, what's our role? How are we addressing racism? How are we addressing, racism in Latin American communities or Latinx communities or Latina communities, because there's anti-Blackness. And specifically here in the Southeast Side, it's really important to know that these communities used to be sundown towns. On the expressways, they had banners saying, if you come here at night and you're Black, you're gonna die. That's how things were so disgusting and so unaccepting. And so I want to give folks that part there. Youth were like, what are we going to do? And at that moment, who rose up was the Southeast Youth Alliance, and then came Bridges Justice Collective, and then came UN10. They came all these folks coming together and did one of the largest Black Lives Matter protests with over 500 community members there on, South Chicago to South Deering. And it's one thing to really have pride to say, folks came together to say that this is not going to be tolerated, that we have to show love. And we proved everyone wrong. And again, want to give love to one of the co-conspirators in that, Luis Corrales, alongside other amazing homies that were there taking care of us. And so with that happening, it created a question of racism in the Southeast Side. And our elders also talked to us about, the health of it, how racism is in public health, how racism is in zoning, how racism was General Iron, where they're going to be receiving $1.6 billion in subsidies, right? Using TIF funding, tax increment funding meant for blighted communities. And our community, which is a blighted community, was going to receive another polluter when we're already overburdened. We have over 70 industrial operations on a river, and we have over 250 industrial operations on the Cayman area. So when we talk about racism, General Iron, our narrative won because we talked about the life expectancy gap between the North Side and the South Side being over 10 years, approximately 30 years. And this is a study by UIC Chicago that came out before the pandemic. We talked about, again, what the clear example was, where are you investing billions of dollars and where are you dumping this? And that's the really important and crucial part that we called this out. And when we talk to this about youth transition, because let's give some love to a lot of the youth, from Trinity Colon to Gregory Miller to Destiny Salazar, Vasquez. We have all these youth, Alejandra Cruz, like there's so many youth from George Washington High School, some who already graduated and are in college studying. Some of them are studying to be environmental scientists. Some of them are wanting to become lawyers because they see themselves in these roles because they want to defend their communities. So they transition from that victory saying, how do we build a safe community? And that's where the conversation of General Iron came, and we talked about this. And General Iron, again, was located in Lincoln Park, in the affluent community. It was purchased by Reserve Management Group, again, who had multiple violations themselves. And within one moment, the former mayor, Rahm Emanuel, signed to give that area money, right, for blighted communities. And in that same signature, changed their zoning from being an industrial corridor to being a modernized industrial corridor, meaning that when they want to remove the operations from that area, they're going to give it to receiving industrial corridors. And who do you think became it receiving industrial corridors? You have communities like the Southeast side. You have communities like Little Village. You have communities like Pilsen. You have all these communities where specifically Black and Brown community members live that are considered receiving industrial corridors. So again, just mentioning how we're considered dumping grounds and sacrifice zones, and we're the ones that are facing discriminatory zoning. In our community, as mentioned, again, all the industry we have on top of one of the worst air conditions and health burdens and pollution. And we grew up here. I always want to give love to saying that we grew up here. My brothers played in the baseball fields, and then later on we found out they had manganese during the pandemic, and we weren't informed until a reporter foiled the city with this information. We went to the Calumet Beach. I love swimming. I love the water. But then there's a confined disposable facility, which is basically all these boats are coming to a river. They're dumping their contaminants, they're dumping their oils. They have to be shoveled and put into a container, but that's still in the water. And the only thing blocking that and our safe water, you think there'd be barriers, you think there'd be concrete, it's sand. So this is just to really talk about what we're fighting against. It's not just general iron, it's environmental racist zoning and our priorities. So going back to the story, you know, youth were so pivotal because they got their parents involved, their families involved. You know, up until December 2020, the summer, when there was community town halls, because we demanded them, because we sought power. We asked the local officials to stand with us, and they didn't stand with us at this time. So we said, well, if we don't have our elected officials on our side, who do we go with? And then the youth were there, we were all there, elders with us, and we said, we're going to build our own power. So we started with 100 people with the first community town hall in that summer. We actually, Louis will remember this, we had a date for an art festival. And instead of having an art festival, we turned that art festival to a listening session to that town hall to make sure we had people there. So our priorities were like public health the whole time and how to have the intersectionality with art too. So just a shout out for the Southeast Youth Alliance for that. So we had 100 folks in the first community town hall. In December of 2020, it grew over 500 people. And then they told us, you know, there might be this final permit given, and we're scared. And then we looked at Diet High School. We looked at Little Village, Lawndale as well, for examples of actions, examples of hunger strikes. And there's this hunger strike involved. And I kid you not, I want to give love to Brianna Bertacci, Chuck Stark, Louis Cabrales, again, always standing with us, Yesenia Chavez, and all the folks that joined us for Solidarity Hunger Strikes. So we went on this 30-day hunger strike, and it was literally youth writing us letters every single day. And we made it very, we made it very intentional not to involve youth in the hunger strike, because we cared really much about their health during this pandemic and as they're being exposed to people every single day. So, but youth were there. They showed up for us every single day, writing us letters, writing us motivation. And I'm gonna be very honest with you, it was one of the most difficult times of our lives, right? You question your worth when you say, I have to put my life on the line just to be heard from the city. And during that time, there was never a conversation with that administration. There's never a conversation with the former Larry. I can't even say her name anymore. That's how gone she is from my mind. But there's literally no response from the former Mayor Lori Lightfoot in this. So I just want to say that we went on a hunger strike and there's still no response from the city. From that, there was federal intervention. Michael Regan at the federal level, the federal EPA stepped in and said there should be a cumulative assessment looking at everything that's affecting our communities before there's a decision. And from there, you know, we did this assessment. We were scared still. It felt like the same repeated process. And what we found was that there was actual denial of the permit. And there's a victory in that. But then there was challenges afterwards where our teachers were being threatened to be fired from being involved in the campaign, where we obviously rallied around them and they didn't get fired, but you just see the repercussions of this. Teachers caring about these issues that are affecting their students, their community, and they're being retaliated against. It doesn't make sense. So folks always ask us, you know, what's happening now? So an administrative judge, because RMG, General Iron, appealed that decision of the denial and went to this administrative judge, And this administrative judge said that public health should not be a lens when it comes to industrial operations. But that's business as usual in Chicago, and that's not right. So right now we're actually still in court trying to appeal the appeal to the denial. So we're constantly fighting for our lives because we're facing zoning challenges. We have issues with the EPA, with the standards. And so people always ask us, why do we do this? And it's because our system is built to tolerate violations, but we're made to endure them and survive them. And that doesn't make sense. From the state level, the permitting process, industries are given the first 2 permits that allow them to build their facilities. And the only appeal that can come from community is the 3rd permit, but the facility is already built. So that process is flawed. Where we look at even examples of Matt Asphalt, shout out to the homies at Neighbors for Environmental Justice for their fight and our solidarity. Their violator, Matt Asphalt, they got funding from a state level when they had city violations. So those things need to be considered when we talk about what's being invested in. And even looking at the depths of Hilco, when we're talking about not considering consequences or even the health repercussions of communities. And even overall, looking at the permitting process in Chicago, the reason we fight is because of our loved ones, because we just want to spend time with them. We just want to be able to prosper. And people always talk about, you know, why don't you move? You have a victim mentality. But to those people, I said, we're literally the ones building farms to address food access. During the pandemic, we built up our own mutual aid systems that since the Great Migration during Black and Brown moving to the city of Chicago created mutual aid systems in the 1930s and 1950s, where we created our own baseball teams in the South Side. You had a Mexican baseball league in the South Chicago area and free grocery stores. Like, that's the type of love we have to make sure people are taking care of each other. And it's always about, folks always ask us, it seems like we're always trying to prove that we're worthy. It's always trying to say that we're trying to prove that or build the data in order to make it clear that we're being harmed. And that doesn't make sense. This even goes back to the 1990s environmental justice principles. We won't be able to talk so much about that today, but I ask you to look into the precautionary action, which means that regardless of there being adequate data, you must stop something if you see that there's harm in the community. So we have these things already, so it's always talking about enforcement. But something that's really exciting is that there's co-governance in this. We talk about co-governance, if you haven't heard this in this election cycle, but it's really important about, and I always give props to Olga Batista, because she says any government has co-governed or made decisions with corporations and industries. It's time they made decisions with us. So we actually won a first of its kind national lawsuit against the city of Chicago through the Housing and Urban Development Department. Like, it's crazy because they stated that the city of Chicago was using discriminatory zoning. I want you to think about that. At the federal level, they're saying Chicago uses discriminatory zoning. In the city of Chicago, what they've done is that they acknowledged, they're settled, and there's a plan. There's a plan of looking at the cumulative impacts and making sure that we talk about what everything's happening in our communities before. And it's really exciting. I'll share with this program the actual community of impacts assessment that was released Monday. It's one of my favorite news besides the end of cash bail and other introductions in city council. But I want to just rephrase it, that none of this could have been done without youth. The constant buildup of momentum, the consistency of folks caring, the culture of care that we've had, and even to talk about the consistency is not about creating action every day. It's about having the consistent values to do the best decision for your communities, whether it's finding your role, being an artist in this movement, being someone who is part of direct actions, being someone who's sharing and creating narrative power to this. You know, everybody has a role, and you've played the role of saying that if these are the standards to which we have to live by, these are standards we won't accept because we cannot live with these standards. Our life is at risk with these standards. And something people have asked is that our generation is one of the loudest, one of the most, and I say it's because we see the harm directly. We see poverty growing at one of the highest rates. We can't tolerate what's happening today, because if we tolerate today, we won't exist tomorrow. So that's a lot of the story that we have to tell today. I know it was a lot of information. Happy to talk with folks afterwards, but I'm really looking for the conversation with our students today.
Thank you so much for that, Oscar. And it's like a perfect segue into our next portion. Again, thank you so much. That was incredible. With the remaining time, we'd like now to invite the student panelists to share questions and thoughts with Oscar. Everybody else who is joining us, please feel free to add any thoughts or questions via the chat or the Q&A feature. Yeah, and any of the students, please feel free to take it away.
Hi, Oscar. Again, Algie. I had a quick thought question. With your involvements, I think you started the Southeast Youth Alliance in like 2018, I believe. And I was wondering, because you have so much emphasis on youth and youth involvement, if there were any kind of like external, or if you did any kind of work trying to go into schools and like trying to teach environmental justice as one of the standards, or just some of the material that's taught in schools, so that today's youth just has more awareness of it, or like if there's I understand that environmental justice activism has so much to do with politics, and I was wondering if you ever considered even going towards like the education route of like helping youth understand these issues at a much younger age.
Yeah, I really appreciate this question, and it's something that we've done at the beginning. Like CIA was started back in 2018, and I was one of the co-founders alongside other phenomenal folks like Ibarra Pantoja, Louis Cabrales, Sara Galvan, Maria Maynez, Nick Robledo. There's just so many folks I want to give love to for CIA. And CIA first started about, tackling the narrative of, living in a disinvested community, because people just talk so negatively about our surroundings. And a lot of folks ended up moving right next door to Whitey, Indiana. And that's how actually me and Louis met. He went and just talked about, if you're going to leave this area, or you're an adult talking negatively about this area, how are you actually building youth to want to love this community, take ownership of this community, if you can only try to build towards the negative part? So we first actually started in high schools trying to talk about visionary sessions and community cleanups. So we literally went around and cleaning up like really awful parts of the community, just to be really honest, and we tasked you, what do you want to see here? And from there, we also partnered at the time with Peggy Salazar from the Southeast Environmental Task Force for George Washington High School to do air monitoring. And we actually did the workshop with the teachers first, and they said, oh, well, can you give us a demonstration? We were in their courtyard, which is the green space within the school, and it was reading levels of yellow, which means that you shouldn't be in that area for 4 to 6 hours. And when we told teachers that, they said, well, that was the reaction. It was quiet. So we built a lot around youth and visiting high school, high school and different schools. And a lot of the time during the actual campaign of General Iron during 2020, a lot of teachers actually asked us to present, the issue of General Iron. And so just so community members could be informed, and also students can be informed. And that was a really crucial part. And the other part to it too was that not only was CU involved in that, but there's other organizations part of that, and also youth themselves saying, tell me what the information is and I'll tell my friends. So I think that's the more crucial part, is that we're not only being the trainers, but we're training the trainers, which were youth.
Hi. So I think I like the fact you mentioned about youth, and that they are not just passive observer, but our active participants in shaping the world. I like that fact. And it's noteworthy that at the federal level, there appears to be a degree of acceptance of zoning discrimination, which is quite alarming, I think. So I have one question for you about the youth involvement. So what policy changes or community-led initiatives are being pursued to improve environmental condition and promote equity and justice for youth in the Southeast Chicago side?
Wow. There's a lot. There's a lot to it. Like the policy side is a really fun side to all this. And I also see the questions in the Q&A. Hopefully we have time to answer those as well. But for specifically the policy, the ones we're directly involved with right now is the community impacts assessment or the implementation of it. Again, through HUD, this needs to be introduced by the end of October. So that's something that's a win, but that's something we've been working on for years before. And that literally, again, looks at the whole picture of a community before allowing any industrial operation to be operating there. On the same level earlier, I also mentioned at the state level, the flaw in the state level permitting, where the permits allow you to build a facility. We're actually tackling that with something called the Environmental Justice Act at the state level. It didn't pass this year, but we're hoping to introduce it again next spring. We did have the votes for it, but to be very honest, they pulled a very strategic vote where they asked for a recount during a time where our supporters were in a budget hearing. So it ended up not passing because of that. So it's really being honest about the strategies that people use in order to not have these things passed. Some things on as well as my mind are thinking about, there's just so many policies that really support our livelihood. So thinking about decarbonization, the way we're actually having clean and affordable building standards, that's something one of our staff at CDF is working on. We have other folks introducing, for example, water for all, in order to make sure that, there's actually folks that can afford their water. Currently, some folks, 20% of their paycheck goes to paying their water bill. And that's not acceptable. So those are some of the policies on top of my mind that we're supporting or in conversations with about. And of course, this is also when we talk about environmental justice, we're talking about public health protections for our community members, but also for workers. So it's intersectionality between public health and environmental justice and labor, just so folks know.
Thank you.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Tanya. I had a quick question. Something that struck out to me about the hunger strike, and even after that, they didn't get to talk to Lori Lightfoot. What was the impact of that hunger strike on the youth and the people that were doing it, and how did that impact their daily lives and other responsibilities that they had going on?
Yeah, so look, again, you see the power we're building, but I'm gonna be honest with you, it's traumatizing. Like it's really traumatizing to know that you have to put your life on the line to be heard. And we even did something called bird watching. It's a tactic where where a political official or target is, and you go and approach them. And even during the hunger strike, we literally approached Lori Lightfoot, and she ran to her SUV. Just to be very honest about this, we also posted about it. It's public information. And on top of the hunger strike, we also got arrested in front of Dr. Awadi's house, and we got arrested. So I think the thing that's happening is that we do a lot to build up these moments, and sometimes they're moments that are very much gloom, like you question why you're doing this. But what resulted from that, from specifically the hunger strike, is we got global attention. From around day 8 and 9, we started getting national coverage, and then I moved to international. I remember being interviewed by a Latin network, and I had my family from Mexico saying, like, the one thing I'll say, and it's always a goofy joke, but my parents only allowed me to go on the hunger strike. They hated it, but they said, don't let your grandparents know. But then my mom's calling me like, hey, your grandma from Mexico found out. And it's like the way that it was built up. And there's just so much attention to this that it grew from there. So without the hunger strike and without youth, we wouldn't have gotten anywhere. But it does take a toll on youth. And I really want to answer later on in this conversation how we take care of ourselves, because how we take care of ourselves is really important. Because work, the same way we organize, in the same way that we're in capitalism and we're work to be exploited, we shouldn't be working to be exploited. We need to be working to be restorative. And a lot of environmental policies are about being preventative, not reactionary.
Hi, this is Will. So my question is, as far as the hunger strike, what was it like organizing that during COVID, and how did that affect your organizing efforts afterwards?
Yeah, it's organizing during a pandemic. I'd also we also acknowledge the way that social media played such a huge role, and because people were working from home, some of them turned out because of that. We don't know, because I'm gonna be honest, because the scenario kept getting worse, right? Rahm Emanuel even like disbanding the Department of Environment during his tenure during this pandemic. Like, you had everything to say this is a clear story. So organizing during that time created a narrative where nobody could say that it was something right for the community. And because of that scenario, organizing during the pandemic gave us a lot of narrative power, especially because we were one of the hardest hit. We had literally people having funeral homes booked every weekend here. It's really sad to say that, but we also had folks that become available. We had to be very careful because of the health impact of COVID and many of us having respiratory issues. So we gained the momentum and power, but we also were risking a lot of our health because of it. And it was something that we took very seriously.
Thank you.
All right, I think that might be all the questions from the student panelists, but if not, please feel free to let me know. But we do have a few questions in the Q&A, and we do still have a few minutes for those questions. We can, I was trying to, but you also have X. Sorry, I was like looking through the Q&A. So I feel like a big one that has been coming up, and I feel like there's about 3 or 4 questions about this, is centered around care. So I'm gonna read one of them, but a few of them are kind of say a similar thing. And so this question's from Ima, and it says, how do you take care of yourself and bring healing to the community members at the same time? We shouldn't be fighting for fundamental rights, but what positive things or gifts have you gotten / have been doing, have you gotten for activism and for justice?
Yeah, that's crucial. It's so crucial. And even you yourselves as college students or as educators, like, the pandemic wasn't easy for any of us. And in general, I really talk about that because we saw a lot of death, right? It's really traumatizing. And I'm gonna be very vulnerable and say that I went through a depression right before the hunger strike. My grandfather passed away because he had holes in his lungs. And recently, as of this year, my grandmother, his wife, also passed away because of, again, holes in her lungs. So that it's a very raw and a real question we have to talk about. And we take care of ourselves by, and it's going to sound really funny to hear this, but it's so sincere, that we spend time together. We talk about our worries together. We eat food together. If Louis is still here, we literally have like a dinner planned for this Friday where we're having a potluck with like homies, right? You have to be spending time together. You have to be building that trust. And I really talk about this point of like, we have to talk about how we want to be leading and how we want to be taking care of each other. Because if we say we're fighting for a future, but we're not implementing some of those changes in the way that we ourselves act in organizing our community spaces, then are we lying to each other? Like, do we believe in radical love? Do we believe in radical hospitality? Do we believe in acceptance, inclusion? Do we believe in these things, and how are we bringing them forth, right? So we always talk about, how do we make sure that we are building our future today, and how are we implementing those ways that we take care of each other, and how are we being intentional about them. And one thing I will always emphasize is the importance of communicating what you appreciate, communicating your love languages to your friends. I really much am a person of I love like words of affirmation, and I love food. So my homies are like always hyping me up, or they're like, "Yo, I'm at this restaurant, Oscar. What do you want?" And I'm like, "You already know what I want." It's usually Chai Burger Baby. It's one of the best restaurants we got, one of the best burger joints we have here. But one thing I do want to echo is like go to therapy, right? Like you go to the gym to take care of your physical health. You go outside to get fresh air, or at least try to get fresh air. But you go to therapy to build that emotional, muscle. It's not there to say that you are in desperate times. It's for you to build those mechanisms to ensure that you're able to tackle hard times. So I want to always emphasize going to therapy and going to mental health resources.
Thank you for that. I think we have time for one more Q&A question before we transition into closing. Oh, and then also, I wanted to ask if Tanya, if they had a question that they would like to ask before I jump into Q&A.
Sorry, were you saying if I had a question to ask?
Yeah, I was just asking if you wanted to contribute a question.
Oh, I asked about the hunger strike, like the impact that had on the youth that organized it.
Okay, great. No worries. We were just doubling back just to make sure.
I will say for hunger strike, just the one point is that like we were on a hunger strike for 30 days, but like it almost felt like we were on a hunger strike for like another 30 days to 3 months, because we still had to be eating these small portions to reintroduce things into our body. I had to eat beans for breakfast for 6 months as my first meal, to make sure my gut isn't exposed, and I'm still feeling health impacts from it today, just to put that out there. One thing I'd love for any student to have, I'm happy to share my email to folks if they have any follow-up questions. We definitely are always appreciative of volunteers or folks wanting to be involved in ways that it intersects with other things. So before the next question, just wanted to share that out loud.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so one of the last questions, and then also you have a lot of praise and a lot of thanks in the Q&A, just so you know, just wanted to put that out there. But I think our last Q&A question is actually going to be about your experiences running for alderman. So we have a question that says, you talked a little bit about how your local officials were working against community during the Stop General Iron campaign. I know you were one of the youngest alderman candidates running for city council this past election. Can you talk a little bit more about this experience, the impact it had on your community, and the importance of having elected people that engage with their community in decision making and prioritize public health and environmental justice? It's a big one, so feel free to.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, y'all, like doing organizing since like being young and from college, like I feel old some days. I'm like, yo, I know Stop Cop City. Love to Stop Cop City, by the way. Shout out to moment of silence for Tortuguita, who was murdered at the hands of the police. But a lot of these events, make me really realize like the impact that we have getting involved and being with our community. And it's really, humbling to say like I was one of the youngest automatic candidates this last election cycle. I was 25, I'm 26 now. And I, again, wouldn't be here without youth. I wouldn't be here without our community. I was asked by different community members. I was asked by different ethnic groups. One of the most humbling one was the Black community. They reached out to me with different leaders, and they said, we want to throw down for you because of your vision. And I was so confused. I was thrown back because I was like, what are you talking about? What vision? I never talk about a vision. They said, well, what's your vision? I'm like, I just want everybody to be able to be part of decisions that impact their lives. And they said, we didn't need to hear you to know that that's your vision, and that's how we stand with you. So being able to have that type of love and that respect from elders is something that really pushed us forward. And it was hard. I'm gonna be honest with you. I've been now healing from, I'm being honest, being destroyed. I feel like I'm going through this reconstruction of myself, of healing, because it felt like you know, really hard being somebody being young and always hearing over and over, like, yes, you were on 2 state boards. Yes, you've done policy recommendations at the state level. Yes, you've helped out at a large scale, you know, citywide permit denial and make sure I improve their health. Yes, you helped invest $7.2 million back into CPS for restorative justice programming. Yes, you set up food pantries and mutual aid during the pandemic for your community, for us. Yes, you did all these things, but you're young and it's not your time. So it felt so much of feeling ashamed, having to prove myself. And it took so much raw emotion to remove those things, to say that, you know, if it's not, regardless of what we do this because nobody deserves this, even if they believe in other things. So it was really difficult. But the most humbling parts were the way people expressed that they supported us, the way that there would be like, my fondest memory was we had a meet and greet and an 11-year-old came. I'm specific about this because I went to greet his mom and he said, don't greet me first, greet my son first because he's the reason why I'm here. And I said, oh, like, nice to meet you. Why are you here? He's like, well, I'm here early because, you know, I have soccer practice in Dalton. Dalton's like 25 minutes away from us. And I really wanted to meet you before, you know, I go. And I just want you to know that you're my hero. And like hearing those types of thing of saying who's with you, having, you know, folks that are these pivotal figures in environmental justice, in labor, in nature, in organizing support. And I always give love to my sister, State Representative Living Jimenez, for endorsing me and supporting me. You know, when we believe in youth, I think it's really believing in the future. So there's a lot of sentiments that went there, but I'll say this, we kicked ass. For being 25 years old, we got about 20% of the votes. We got some of the most important endorsements from the Chicago Teachers Union to Sierra Club. And I think about that all the time because we didn't win, we didn't lose, because our platform, we put our platform out first about, you know, like preventative safety, right? Talking about we have to prevent it versus react to it. Really talking about we have to look at other safety measures, talking about what's the standard for environmental justice, environmental health, right? All our policy was literally everything everyone else used. So we set the precedence of what should be happening in our community. And nobody can take that away from us, because they had to say, we have to address environmental justice. They said that they have to address safety. They said that they have to address misconduct and misspending in our budgets. Like, we set the precedence. And again, want to also give out love to the person who helped with that policy platform, Brendan Santoyo.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for that great presentation. Yeah, I always love hearing you speak and just hearing you talk about your experiences, especially obviously knowing each other and both coming from the Southeast side. Yeah, thank you so much for that great presentation, Oscar. And thank you for all the folks who put together some like really great and insightful questions, and also just like so showed some love, which was great. And while this brings our program to a close, we hope that you can join us at our next virtual Climates of Inequality program, which is on Wednesday, October 18th from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. And I also put it in the chat. Our next guest speaker is actually going to be the executive director of the local community organization, which Oscar also shouted out, Neighbors for Environmental Justice, Alfredo Romo. And you can register via the LCC website, where you can also find the recording of all of our Climate of Inequality presentations. We hope to see you there, and thank you to everyone who stayed till the end. Have a great evening.
Bendiciones ya. Chao.